A man steps outside his house on a quiet Sunday morning. He's calm, unbothered, maybe too calm. He doesn't know that he's about to die. Suddenly, a motorcycle slows near the curb. No warning. A masked gunman opens fire. One shot, two, then more. The man collapses on the pavement. Blood pools around him. He's hit in the chest, in the head. The shooter doesn't even flinch. Just pulls the trigger again, walks off, vanishes down the street. No arrest, no suspect, no clear motive. But here's the twist. The man lying dead on the sidewalk wasn't just anyone. He was Pedro Rodrigues Filho, better known as Pedrinho Matador, one of the most notorious serial killers in Brazil's history. A man who murdered over 70 people and claimed he did it all in the name of justice. He called himself a cleansing agent, a hunter of the corrupt. He killed drug dealers, rapists, gangsters, and sometimes even people he just didn't like. He once said, "I only kill bad people, the worst kinds." But now, he's the one lying in a pool of blood. And the world can't help but ask, who kills the killer? And why now? To answer that, we need to go back, not a few days, not a few years. We need to go back to the very beginning, to a broken home, a teenage boy, and a decision that would stain his soul forever. Long before he became a legend of death, Pedro Rodrigues Filho was just a boy. Born on the wrong side of Brazil into a world that didn't offer protection, only punishment. His story begins in Minas Gerais, 1954. From the moment he came into the world, it was as if violence was stitched into his fate. He was born with a bruised skull, a result, they say, of his own father kicking his pregnant mother in the stomach. That was his welcome to life. Pedro's home wasn't just broken, it was brutal. His father was an abusive, alcoholic figure whose hands delivered more pain than protection. The beatings were frequent, the shouting never stopped. And somewhere in the middle of it all, a young Pedro learned that words didn't matter unless they were backed by violence. By the age of 13, he wasn't a kid anymore. He was calculating, watching, storing names. Then everything changed. His father was fired from his job as a school security guard, accused of stealing food from the cafeteria. It was more than humiliation. It was a betrayal Pedro couldn't stomach. In his eyes, someone had falsely destroyed his family's already fragile life. So, he made a decision. He stole a gun. He tracked down the man who had accused his father, the deputy mayor, and shot him in cold blood right outside a government building. He didn't flinch. He didn't run. He was just 14 years old. But he wasn't done. Within days, he hunted down a second man, a security guard he believed had also played a role in the firing, and killed him too. This wasn't a random act of rage. It was deliberate, calculated, vengeful. Pedro wasn't killing for fun. Not yet. He believed he was defending his family's honor. He thought he was righting a wrong. He thought he was justified. But what started as revenge would become ritual. Because Pedro Rodrigues Filho had just discovered something terrifying. Murder felt like justice. After those first two murders, Pedro didn't disappear. He didn't hide. He ran to Mogi das Cruzes, a city near Sao Paulo, but not to start over. He went there to sharpen his purpose. Pedro Rodrigues Filho believed Brazil was rotting, not from poverty, not from politics, but from bad people. And in his twisted mind, he was the solution, the cleansing agent. In Mogi, he immersed himself in Brazil's underworld. He aligned with small-time criminals, then turned on them when he discovered they were abusive, corrupt, or disloyal. He was no longer killing for family. Now, he was killing by code. One of his most infamous early targets was a drug trafficker who had been abusing his pregnant girlfriend. Pedro invited the man to a party. They drank, laughed. The man thought he was safe. He wasn't. Pedro stabbed him to death mid-conversation, surrounded by music, food, and people too stunned to react. It wouldn't be the last time he killed in public. In his mind, the more witnesses, the more justice. He wanted people to see what happened when the so-called wicked crossed his path. By the time he was in his early 20s, Pedro had racked up 12 confirmed kills. He targeted drug dealers, gang members, abusers, and thieves, sometimes based on whispers, other times from personal judgment. There was no trial, no evidence, only execution. And that's when he earned the name that would haunt Brazil for decades: Pedrinho Matador, Little Pedro the Killer. The press was divided. Some called him a monster. Others called him a necessary evil, a product of a failed justice system doing what the law refused to do. And Pedro leaned into the myth. He was becoming more than just a man. He was becoming a message. But what no one knew, not yet, was that Pedro's most gruesome acts were still to come. Not on the streets, but inside prison walls.
Eventually, the law caught up with him. Pedro Rodrigues Filho was arrested in 1973 at just 19 years old. At that point, he'd already killed at least 10 men. But what shocked investigators wasn't just the number. It was how calmly he confessed. He didn't deny anything. In fact, he bragged. He told police, "I'm not sorry. I only kill criminals." They sentenced him to 128 years in prison, a lifetime behind bars. But locking up Pedro didn't stop the killing. It amplified it. From the moment he entered Brazil's overcrowded, violent prison system, Pedro became a predator among predators. He wasn't afraid. He was on a mission. Inside those walls, he became judge, jury, and executioner. And his code didn't change. If you were a rapist, a child molester, or even suspected of betrayal, you were a target. In his first few weeks, he killed 2 inmates, both accused of sexual crimes. He said it wasn't revenge, it was cleansing. In one infamous incident, he slaughtered his own cellmate, then carved a message into the corpse's chest with a homemade blade. The guards found the body hours later. Pedro was sitting beside it, calm, smiling. Over the next 2 decades, he killed dozens more behind bars, sometimes in self-defense, sometimes not. His total confirmed prison body count is at least 47. He even told journalists he once murdered a man and ate part of his heart, though some believe that was theatrics. Pedro wasn't just surviving prison. He was ruling it. Inmates feared him, guards avoided him. And through it all, he kept telling the same story. I kill those who deserve it. The justice system failed. I didn't. But this wasn't justice. It was a reign of terror. Because eventually, even a man with a code starts breaking his own rules. Some murders are fueled by rage, some by principle, and some by blood. Pedro Rodrigues Filho had always claimed his killings were justified, that he only targeted those who hurt others, criminals, abusers, traitors. But in one unforgettable act, he turned that mission inward, toward his own family. While in prison, Pedro received news that his father had been arrested, not for theft, not for drugs, but for murder. His father had killed Pedro's mother, stabbed her 21 times with a kitchen knife. The man who used to beat Pedro as a boy had now committed the ultimate crime. And in Pedro's world, that meant one thing. He had to die.
When he found out his father had been transferred to the same prison complex, Pedro made a decision, one that would etch his name deeper into Brazilian infamy. He waited, and then he struck. Pedro cornered his father in a hallway and attacked with a shiv fashioned from a rusted piece of metal. The assault was brutal. Rage didn't just guide him, it consumed him. He stabbed his father over 20 times, mirroring the exact number of wounds his mother had suffered. Then, as if possessed, he cut open the chest and ripped out a piece of his father's heart. And he bit into it. Whether he swallowed it or not has been debated for years, but the message was loud and clear. This wasn't just a killing, it was a ritual. Pedro later told the press, quote, "He deserved it. He was the reason I became what I am." It was revenge, but also a kind of self-exorcism, as if killing his father was the only way to kill the part of himself he hated most. But instead of closure, all it did was cement what many already feared. Pedro wasn't a vigilante anymore. He wasn't cleansing evil. He was becoming it. And yet, the story doesn't end there. Because Pedro's story wasn't one that faded quietly behind concrete walls. No, the world outside was still watching, and somehow, Pedro was far from done. By now, Pedro Rodrigues Filho had murdered over 70 people, nearly half of them behind bars. He was the kind of figure most societies lock away and try to forget. But Brazil didn't forget. Brazil watched. And then, Brazil started listening. In the early 2000s, something strange began to happen. Pedro, still in prison, began giving interviews on radio, on TV. Journalists lined up to speak with the man behind the myth. And Pedro, he didn't shy away. He grinned, he joked, he told war stories, like a man talking about football, not murder. In one interview, he boasted, "I killed over 100 criminals. I lost count." Some called him a monster with a microphone. Others called him a folk hero, the product of a broken system who took justice into his own hands. Even behind bars, Pedro gained fans. He received love letters, marriage proposals, fan art. The media dubbed him Brazil's Dexter, a real-life killer who only murdered bad people. It was surreal, absurd, and dangerous because it gave Pedro something he'd never had before, a platform. Incredibly, in 2007, after serving 34 years, Pedro was released, thanks to a loophole in Brazil's sentencing laws that limited prison time regardless of the body count. He walked out with a body count over 70 and into the arms of a curious, chaotic public. And what did he do next? He launched a YouTube channel. Yes, YouTube. From a man who had ripped out his own father's heart to a man giving advice on crime, justice, and morality from a plastic chair in someone's backyard. He said, "I regret nothing, but I believe in God now. I'm not that person anymore." Some viewers were horrified, others couldn't stop watching. He told stories, gave commentary on current crimes, even warned young people not to follow in his footsteps. It was as if Pedrinho Matador had rebranded, from killer to content creator. But deep down, the public couldn't decide. Was this redemption, or just a mask over the same old face? And lurking beneath it all was a single question no one wanted to say out loud. Could a man like Pedro ever really change? Pedro Rodrigues Filho lived longer than most of his victims, longer than anyone expected, but not forever. He'd walked free, told his story, rebranded as a redeemed man, but some wounds don't close and some enemies don't forgive. On March 5th, 2023, Pedro was standing outside his brother's home in Mogi das Cruzes, the same city where his violent legend began 5 decades earlier. It was early, quiet, normal, until it wasn't. A motorcycle approached slowly. No warning, no words. Then, gunfire. One shot, then another.
then more. Pedro collapsed on the pavement, his blood spilling into the same streets he once ruled with fear. He was hit in the chest, in the head. The shooter didn't flinch, just pulled the trigger again, and then vanished down the road. No arrests, no suspects, no one came forward. It was over in seconds. A man who had killed over 70 people, survived multiple assassination attempts, and turned his life into a violent spectacle was now just another body on a street corner. The headlines were immediate. Social media exploded. Some mourned, some cheered, but most were just stunned. How does a man like Pedrinho Matador, a killer, a celebrity, a contradiction, die like this? Quietly, without drama. No epic final stand, no message left behind, just a life snuffed out by the same violence he once claimed to control. His YouTube channel went silent. His story became legacy. But what kind? Was Pedro a monster or a mirror? Did he reflect justice twisted by trauma or simply evil in plain sight? In the end, there are no neat answers, only bodies, only questions, and one uncomfortable truth. Sometimes when you spend your life playing God, someone else decides when it's your turn to be judged.